This week's video is another Strange Editions episode featuring Ford, Mercury, and Lincoln. I tend to make one of these videos at least once a month, and they are some of my favorites to make. I come across some very interesting editions that most people don't know about. Chances are there's at least one entry that you've never heard of. Trust me. Entries in these videos can be packages, editions, sometimes models, and anything in between. Also, you guys seem to enjoy these videos, which is always a good thing. I have an entire playlist dedicated to these episodes if you're interested in discovering more bizarre editions from other brands. I will say the farther you go back, the worse my videos are. In typical fashion, I will be going in chronological order, starting in 1970 and ending in 2003. There are a total of 5 entries, and there are chapters in the description if you'd like to skip over. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments down below. These lists are becoming a little harder and harder to make. With all that said, here are some of the strangest editions from Ford, Mercury, and Lincoln. The first generation Mercury Cougar is arguably one of, if not the best generations. They were offered from 1967 until 1970. Of course, with every car, usually there are a few different trims and sometimes packages. 1967 introduced the Dan Gurney Special Package. 1969 through 70 had the Cougar Eliminator. There was a Cougar Sports Special Package, and the feature in this video, the Houndstooth Package. These were only offered in 1970, the first gen's final year, and a little over 7,500 units were produced. The goal for this package was to sort of gradually shift away from performance and towards luxury for the Cougar. I'm not saying these second gens didn't have any performance models, because they did. I'm just saying this was a step towards that direction. It's obvious what this edition was about: houndstooth vinyl top and optional interior. 2 different color options, either white and black or gold and black. What even is houndstooth? Basically just a type of pattern that was popular in the 30s and 50s with designers and whatnot. I have not come across any car with houndstooth pattern as an option or package. It's different and unusual, kind of like Mopar's Gator Grain vinyl, and a lot of people don't know about it. 1985 Mercury LTS. If you don't remember or know about the LTD-LX, I have an entire video dedicated to it, but essentially it was a 4-door Mustang. It had the high output V8, 4-speed auto with overdrive, upgraded brakes and suspension, a tachometer. It was one of the first sleepers. Around 3,200 units were made for 1984 and 85 only. Apparently Canada had their own version as the Mercury LTS, offered only for 1985. It being a Mercury, of course, the grille, taillights, and badging were slightly different, along with having a nicer interior compared to the LTD-LX. They also received all of the improvements made to the LX: bucket seats, a tachometer, a center console with floor shifter, and beefed up mechanics. Front and rear anti-sway bars, gas shocks, larger brakes, and quicker ratio rack and pinion steering. When I make these videos, photos and videos are hard to come by, and this entry is no exception. Only 135 Mercury LTSs were made, one of the smallest produced cars that I've ever featured on this channel. I would take one of these over a Cougar XR7 of the same year. They're just more practical, and I think they look a lot better. Looks like no one in Canada agreed back in the 80s, and they were cut the same year they were introduced. The next entry goes to the Mercury Sable 50th Anniversary Edition. Now, I know what you're thinking, or maybe I don't, but this seems like it's going to be boring. What, there's 50th anniversary badges, a nicer interior? No, not even close. Back in 85, the Sable and Taurus were a big deal. They sold well, many generations followed, the styling was very advanced, pretty good cars. Fast forward to 1989, and there's a new 50th anniversary package for the Sable. Wait a minute, this car hasn't been around for 50 years, it hasn't even been around for 5. When there's these anniversary editions, usually it's for that car, like the anniversary Thunderbirds and Eldorados. 1989 would mark Mercury's 50th anniversary, and so they gave the Sable this special package. Why? Because the Sable was successful. Thank goodness for this forum post made back in 2007, because apart from it, there's practically nothing out there about these. So, just 50 of these were produced, 50th anniversary for either GS or LS models, or base and top trim. Ford wanted to create a sport luxury version of the Sable. It would be called the LTS. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Ford would give the Sable SHO suspension, but not the SHO engine. Instead, they plan on using a high output version of the 3.8 V6, which was found in the later Taurus PPVs. A 15 horsepower bump from the regular 3.8 totaling to around 155-160. That's what the early PPVs were rated at. The Sable LTS may have been different without the dual exhaust system seen on the PPVs. Again, not much info on these. I have no idea how you would get your hands on one of these back in '89, but 50 people did. These 50th anniversary Sables were sort of a test meal for Ford. The idea fell through the next year because the SHO was a huge hit, and so they didn't want to take sales away from it and rather put money towards SHO development. Into the 2000s with the Lincoln LS. When these first came out, it was a big step up for Lincoln. They finally grew some balls. A performance-focused rear-wheel drive V8 sedan. Performance was never really part of the Lincoln brand. It's always been about comfort and luxury. The Mark 8 could be an exception, but other than that, I can't think of any. Of course, the newest Continental and MKZ with that twin-turbo V6 making 400 horsepower came out after the LS. Anyway, for just 3 model years, the LS came with an optional 5-speed manual transmission. Lincoln by this point hadn't offered a manual transmission since the early 50s. So this was just so random and out of the blue to consumers. Unfortunately, the 5-speed was only offered with Ford's or Jaguar's 3-liter Duratec V6. 220 horsepower and 215 pound-feet of torque for a car that weighs over 3,500 pounds, it wasn't the fastest off the line. Also, you had to pay an additional $1,000 to get the Sport package, and only then could you pick the manual. Included as well were 17-inch wheels, traction control, and stiffer suspension. The suspension of the LS was already an independent double wishbone system for both the front and rear. Additionally, it had a near 50-50 weight distribution. That being said, they handled quite well for a car of its size. Maybe not the fastest off the line, but pretty decent handling. As you would expect, the manual transmission was not popular among Lincoln buyers, and so it was dropped after 2002. Less than 2,400 LSs came with the 5-speed. I'm glad Lincoln tried it. It was an effort, and you have to pay respect to it. The last bizarre edition is just so random, I don't expect anyone to know about it. 2003 Lincoln Aviator Kitty Hawk Edition. Lincoln wanted to honor the Wright brothers as 2003 would mark 100 years since their first successful flight. The location of that flight was in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Shout out to North Carolina. So sorry about the Panthers and Bryce Young. We are all rooting for him. At least I know I am. It's horrible what's going on. Henry Ford and the Wright brothers had mutual respect with each other and met a few times, but it's still a very bizarre collaboration. 2003 would also mark the 100th year anniversary for Ford, so there's that too. I don't know if this was intentional, but the only color offered was black, just like the Model T 100 years ago. What even was the Aviator, because they weren't all that common. Basically, it was a luxurious Ford Explorer or shortened Navigator. They were pretty short-lived, they only lasted, 3 model years? The base price for an Aviator back in '03 was around $45,000. The Kitty Hawk package was an additional $23,000, which in today's money would be more than $80,000. So, what did you get for such a steep price? Special Kitty Hawk badges, which look kinda cool, it's definitely different. Chrome grille and rear spoiler, chrome exhaust tip, chrome wheels, and that's all for the exterior. The interior is what you're really paying for. Black premium leather seats that are heated and ventilated, Kitty Hawk graphics on the seats and floor mats, mink zebrano wood trim, and lots of added options. Some will find this boring, some won't. I really don't care for it, but it's a perfect entry for this video. And there you have it, some of the strangest additions from Ford, Mercury, and Lincoln. Except there was no mention of Ford at all. I was able to find some, but they weren't as bizarre or strange as the ones in this video. So if you have any suggestions, feel free to drop them down in the comments. Thank you all for making it to this point. Hearing me yap for 10 minutes straight takes a special person. I have changed my upload schedule to Fridays between 5 and 7. With school and everything, I found this to be a lot more doable and less stressful. That is going to wrap it up for this week's video. Hope you all have a great rest of your week, and I will try to see you all next week.